Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Bar Association's McCree Luncheon. I am Michael Lee. I'm president of the association this year. Our president-elect is Tom Shear, vice president is Kim Altman, secretary-treasurer is Susan Galuli, and program chair is Jeff Apple. They are the ones who help me do what I do, so please join me in thanking them with a round of applause. First, I would like to acknowledge the judicial officers who we have in our presence. I would ask them to stand as I read their names, and I would ask you to hold your applause until I'm done reading the names. Chief Judge Gerald Rosen, Judge Avern Cohn, Judge Paul Borman, Judge George Karamstee, Judge Victoria Roberts, Judge David Lawson, Judge Sean Cox, Judge Gershwin Drain. And from the Bankruptcy Court, we have Judge Stephen Rhodes, Judge Walter Shapiro, Judge Thomas Tucker, and from the Magistrate Judge ranks, we have Magistrate Judge Mark Randon and Magistrate Judge Lori Michelson and Magistrate Judge Paul Komovis. Please join me in welcoming our judicial officers. So as to not delay the program, we're going to get right to the presentation of the McCree Award itself. The McCree Award is, winner is designated by the Social Justice Committee, and I would call forward to the podium the co-chairs of the Social Justice Committee to make this presentation. From the law firm of Butts Long, Cindy Haffey, and from the United States Attorney's Office, Simon Mosen. Please welcome them.
Thank you so much. For the past 5 years, I've had the honor of participating in the nomination committee for the Honorable Wade H. McCree Jr. Award for the Advancement of Social Justice. The Wade H. McCree Jr. Award honors individuals or organizations that made significant contributions in the advancement of social justice. And these contributions may include advancing social justice in the areas involving poverty, promoting economic or educational opportunities, or fighting discrimination in the areas of race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, and economic status. The recipient may be selected from any field of endeavor, including those such as law, social service, community organization, volunteer activities, journalism, education, and the like.
Past recipients of the award include the Honorable Damon Keith, Governor George Romney, Governor William Milliken, the Neal Legal Team, and the Freedom House. This year, the committee again received numerous outstanding nominations. We would like to thank each and every one of you that took the time and effort to write such well-deserved nominations. And we would also like to thank everyone who will continue to do that in the future. We will be accepting nominations throughout the year for this award. It is now our great pleasure to introduce the Honorable David Lawson, who will be presenting and accepting the award on behalf of this year's recipient, Daniel Crickbaum. Thank you.
As the presenter and acceptor of this award, I like to think of myself as a full-service speaker. Unfortunately, however, our recipient, Dr. Dan Crickbaum, was injured yesterday and is committed to bed rest and was not able to attend. I understand that he will return to health, but unfortunately, he's not able to join us today. I would like to point out, though, that since 1990, the Detroit chapter of the Federal Bar Association has conferred the Wade Hampton McCree Jr. Award for the Advancement of Social Justice to honor individuals and organizations who have made significant contributions to the advancement of social justice. As mentioned before, the recipients have included our own Judge Damon Keith, Mayor Dennis Archer, Governors Romney and Milliken, Father Bill Cunningham, Eleanor Jositis, and a host of others. I think we are all familiar with the achievements of the award's namesake and Judge McCree's devotion to justice, education, and equality. One interesting fact about Judge McCree is that among the dozens of committees, councils, and boards on which he served is the Detroit Roundtable for the National Conference of Christians and Jews, the NCCJ, which brings us to today's awardee. Reverend Dr. Daniel H. Crickbaum was the president and CEO of the NCCJ, later known as the Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion, where he served from July of 1996 through the end of 2007. He spent a great part of his career in this nonprofit organization promoting understanding and respect among all races, religions, and cultures. The organization itself has been dedicated to the elimination of bias and racism through advocacy, conflict resolution, and education. Dr. Crickbaum has spent his life in the service of others, including his involvement in NCCJ, positions of public service, and innumerable efforts at community building and development. Under his guidance, the NCCJ received the DTE Energy Bridge Builder Award and the Lucent Technology Foundation's recognition as one of the top 10 youth diversity programs in the country. Before he was president and CEO of the NCCJ, Dr. Crickbaum was the executive vice president for WTVS in Detroit, which some of us remember in the pre-cable era as Channel 56. Don't admit it if you don't remember that, it's all right. I should say don't admit it if you do. He was responsible for the station's fundraising and initiated a number of educational projects on parenting, youth violence, and community affairs programming. He served as the director of the Recreation and Parks Agency for the city of Detroit from 1976 through 1993. During that period, Detroit built riverfront parks east of the Renaissance Center, as well as 10 new community centers throughout the city. In 1986, the United Way Community Services named him Executive of the Year for the nonprofit community. Dr. Crickbaum has also served on numerous community boards and agencies, including the Executive Committee of the Southeastern Michigan Council of Governments, the Greater Detroit Area Health Council, and the United Way Community Impact Council. Dr. Crickbaum received his Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the College of Worcester, his Master's of Divinity from the Union Theological Seminary at Columbia University. He is an ordained Methodist minister, and his PhD in the Philosophy of Education from Wayne State University. He served the state of Michigan as the Chief Operating Officer in Governor Jennifer Granholm's executive office. There, he continued his work as an aggressive advocate for the state's economy, increased health access for all people, and a high-quality and highly educated workforce. And he served under two Michigan governors, Snyder and Granholm, as the director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights from March 2010 until he retired in July last summer. Dan Crickbaum, in my humble opinion, is one of the few true and sincere advocates of the Detroit metropolitan area and its citizens. It is fitting that he joins the list of distinguished recipients of this award. Recognizing him for this achievement and his selflessness does honor to the memory of Judge McCree. And so it is an honor and a privilege to accept on behalf of Reverend Dr. Dan Crickbaum, my friend, this year's McCree Award. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid that's all you're going to hear from Judge Lawson. I just asked him if he could juggle. He said no. So, Dr. Crickbaum is a very deserving recipient of this award. I know as far back as the late 90s, he did some service on the board of directors of the Detroit Urban League as well. So I know his heart is in community activism and community service and helping people enjoy a better quality of life. So with that, lunch is served. And so without further ado, I will introduce the person to introduce the speaker who helped me get the speaker. Please welcome the Honorable Denise Page Hood.
I'm really not that informal. Oh, maybe I am. But I think that probably Michael's story lets you know a lot about Judge Donald and how approachable and what a wonderful person and judge she is. In your program is a little bit different introduction than I'm going to give. It has some quotes from her, and I hope you'll take a look at it. But I'm going to give you a little bit more formal piece, especially since I let her be contacted by email. Judge Bernice B. Donald was nominated to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit by our President, Barack Hussein Obama, on December 1st, 2010. And she was confirmed by the Senate in September of 2011, and she is the first African-American woman to serve on that court. Prior to joining the Court of Appeals, she served on the United States District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, appointed by President William Jefferson Clinton in 1995. And prior to that, she served as a judge of the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of Tennessee from 1988 until 1996. She was the first African-American woman in the history of the United States to serve as a bankruptcy judge. Judge Donald is the daughter of a domestic worker and a self-taught mechanic born in DeSoto County, Mississippi. And she received her BA and her JD from Memphis State University School of Law in 1979. I know, that was a faux pas, right? But it was because I was talking to a law clerk that went to MSU before I came up here. She was in private practice in Memphis. She served as a staff attorney of the Employment Law and Economic Development Unit of the Memphis Area Legal Services in Tennessee in 1980. She was an assistant public defender for the Shelby County Public Defender's Office. And she was elected in 1982 to the General Sessions Criminal Court and became the first African-American woman to serve as a judge in the history of the state of Tennessee. She served on the General Sessions Criminal Court from 82 to 88 and also served as an adjunct professor at the Southwest Tennessee Community College during that period of time. She has served as faculty for the Federal Judicial Center, and for those of you who don't know, that's the education and training arm for the federal judiciary and the federal courts, and on the National Judicial College. She's also served on the board of the Federal Judicial Center and has been a part of several appointments, first by the Chief Justice Rehnquist to the Judicial Conference Advisory Committee on Bankruptcy Rules, where she served for 6 years, and then an appointment by Chief Justice Roberts, where she serves an indefinite term on the Judicial Branch Committee of the Judicial Conference of the United States. She is very active, and many of you may know her from either the American Bar or the National Bar, and those in her home state know her from the Tennessee and Memphis Bar Association, as well as the Ben F. Jones chapter of the National Bar Association. When she was nominated by President Obama, she was serving as the secretary of the 430,000 member American Bar Association. She's also served on many committees for both the American and National Bar Association, currently serving as the co-chair of the Diversity Committee and Task Force on Implicit Bias for the ABA section of litigation, and as co-chair for a similar committee for the ABA Tort Trial and Insurance section. She served on the board of editors of the American Bar Journal of the American Bar Association. And she serves as a member of the House of Delegates, the Nominating Committee, and the ABA Africa Law Institute and Section Leadership for Criminal Justice and Labor and Employment Law sections. She was also elected in 2013 to the Board of Directors of the American Judicature Association, and in August of 2013, she was featured in the Federal Lawyer magazine. During its 2013 annual meeting, that annual meeting of the National Bar Association, she received the William H. Hastie Award, which is the Judicial Council's highest award and is presented to recognize excellence in legal and judicial scholarship and demonstrated commitment to justice under the law. Judge Donald has been selected to serve to receive the Justice William Brennan Award by the University of Virginia in January of 2014. I should also note that in 2014, she will serve as a judge in residence at Washington University in Missouri, and at the American University School of Law in Washington, D.C. She served as faculty. We were talking last night about serving and her interest in international law, and she served, has been involved in judicial training and legal and technical capacity building programs in a number of countries, including Romania, Mexico, Turkey, Brazil, Bosnia, Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, Senegal, Rwanda, Tanzania, Russia, Egypt, Morocco, Thailand, and Armenia. And she's also lectured at a number of the states that were formerly a part of the Soviet Union. She herself has led trips to Johannesburg and Cape Town, South Africa, and she also was in attendance in the same year she led that delegation to a trial involving misconduct of a judge in Zimbabwe, so that you can see that she's very involved internationally. She's served as president of numerous organizations that are related to the law and also to public service. But one of the ones that most struck me was that in June of 2005, she co-founded a program called For Life, a skills training and enrichment program for students ages 6 to 15, designed to teach children to become positive, productive citizens. So we can see that she not only gives to her legal community and the community at large, but also to children. She's also a member of the board of directors of the Stax Museum, so all of you can come up and ask her about that later. And the Stax Museum is the Museum of American Soul and Stax, and she also serves on their academy, which is a charter school. So now you can ask her not only about the law and her international pursuits, but a little bit about Stax music. I hope you'll welcome Judge Bernice Donald.
Thank you so much, Judge Hood, for that wonderful introduction. It kind of reminds me of a story that I read many years ago where there was a man who lived in a community, and he was the kind of guy who would frequent the bar, not the one that requires a law license to frequent, but he would go there, and he was fairly loud and would get into fights. He would pick fights with people, and it was just just an awful kind of a guy. He was the kind of guy who would leave in the morning going to work when he chose to go to work. He would leave and slap the wife, kick the dog, and pinch the kids. And one day he went to a bar and got into a fight, and he picked on someone who was his better. And he was stabbed and died, and he went, they would have his funeral. So his wife and child attended the funeral. And when they were sitting there, no offense to the ministers in the room, but when somebody dies, no matter what kind of life they've lived, somebody finds something wonderful to say about them. And they were eulogizing this man in glowing terms, talking about what a wonderful father he'd been and what he'd done in the community. And the mother touched her child and said, "David, go up there and look in that casket and see if that's your dad, because I think they've got the wrong man." As I sat here listening to Judge Hood, I thought, maybe somebody else is going to stand up after this, but I do thank you for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. And I thank all of you for being here. I know it's snowing outside, and I appreciate the effort you made to get here. I want to thank President Michael Lee for inviting me, giving me this opportunity to come and be a part of this gathering. I had wanted, you didn't know this, but I had wanted to come to Michigan to meet lawyers and to be a part of something ever since I got on the circuit, and you made it happen. And I am so grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much. For all of the judges who are here, I know you have busy dockets, and I thank you for being here, taking time out of your schedule. For those of you who have hosted and entertained me since I've been here, thank you. For those I've met this morning who have given me wonderful smiles and kind handshakes, thank you. For my classmate as a judge, Judge Shapiro, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your many years of friendship. You know, before I go further, Denise, that was an amazing introduction. And I just want to thank my longtime friend, Judge Susan Mosi, for not telling what she knows. And for Tony Jenkins, who knows more about me than probably anybody in the room, since he was my evaluator for this position. Thank you for your silence. Thank you. Many of you have asked me what I plan to talk about. And I have been evasive because I wanted you to stay. So what I want to talk about today is the strengths and weaknesses of appellate advocacy, particularly in the area of ERISA cases. And I've got a few things I want to say about that, and so I appreciate you being here. And I'm going to ask the ushers, if there are any, to lock the door so that you don't leave. No, I'm teasing. I'm not going to talk about that. And the sigh of, you're sighing in relief, but, and I'm not going to be terribly long, because I have to tell you one other quick story. And I'm going to violate the rules, but I'm in a room full of lawyers, and somebody will represent me if I get into trouble for saying what I'm about to say. This came from the Reader's Digest many years ago, when the Reader's Digest had good stories. There was a story about a minister who preached in a community. It didn't say which denomination, but he had been assigned to a particular church, Mr. McCree, and he would go to that church and he would fervently preach the gospel. And Mr. Lewis, his congregation would sit there and listen to him, not because they were particularly enraptured by what he was saying, but out of a sense of obedience and reverence for the position. Now, he was a person who was fairly intuitive, and he knew that he was not connecting with this congregation. And so he went to his home, Judge Lawson, and prayed to the Lord for guidance. And he went back to his congregation this Sunday morning, and he told them, I have some good news and some bad news for you. He said, I know that, you are not excited by my messages. And so I've prayed to the Lord about this situation, and the Lord has answered my prayer. And so I have good news and bad news for you. He said, the good news is that the Lord has seen fit to move me to another congregation. And the bad news is, this is the last Sunday morning that I shall ever have to stand before you and preach the gospel. And Judge Drain, at that moment, everyone in the congregation stood and sang, what a friend we have in Jesus. Now, I don't want you all to have to stand and sing on me, so I'm going to try to move through my comments expeditiously and then take my seat. What do I want to talk to you about today? I really want to come to you and talk to you about lawyers as leaders. And my comments are designed to express my lifelong thanks for the courage and the leadership of lawyers. So I want to make 3 points. You as lawyers are the architects of society, and the law is the tool that you will use to build that society. And I want to remind you that laws are not self-executing. And further, I want to warn you about the fallacy of assumption. And after I've made those few points, I'm going to take my leave. What an honor to be a part of a program that's named after Judge Wade McCree, Jr., and to give it in a community which boasts as the home of the icon, Judge Damon Keith. Judge McCree, lawyer, judge, Solicitor General, professor, his life served as a beacon to move our country toward the ideals expressed in the Charters of Freedom, our founding documents: equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity. His life's accomplishment and his life's work hewed a path, and it laid the stepping stones for folks like me to be able to walk to a position that I enjoy today. I recognize that as I stand here, I am standing on the shoulders of men and women who came before me, who gave it all that I might have the opportunity to espouse and aspire to those positions that our documents speak to. It is important to recognize that while Judge McCree paid a huge price, and we know his name, that there are many men and women whose names were never mentioned, never recorded in the annals of history, and yet they were heroes and heroines, and we thank them for that work. This year we're going to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the wonderful case, the Signal decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, a case which outlawed segregation in public schools. Judge McCree became a judge here in Michigan, the first African American appointed a judge in the Circuit Court of Wayne County, and that happened a number of years after Brown. He became a judge on the U.S. District Court in the Eastern District of Michigan in 1961. And to put that in perspective, Mr. Lee and I were talking earlier about math and how we should use calculus. I'm gonna let you all calculate the years. But I want to tell you that he became a judge 10 years before the first email was sent. Only 10 years before the first email was sent. Now, you know, it's unfortunate that we still have to calculate first, but I want to show you that the spans of time that we're operating in is really not that long. He became a judge at a time of turbulence during our development, 1961. Now think how old our republic was at that time, and still we're struggling with the notion of attaining equal justice, equal access, equal opportunity, and equal freedom. Things that were going on during his lifetime. You know that in 1961, that was the fight and rioting over the court-ordered admission of 2 African Americans into the University of Georgia. Charlene Hunter Galt was one of those. 1961. 1961, you had the Freedom Riders in the South riding for freedom, and their bus was attacked and burned, and people were beaten. 1961. And during that same time, you had voter registration activists, Herbert Lee, killed in Macomb, Mississippi, for trying to vote. Later on, you had Fannie Lou Hamer that next year trying to register to vote in Mississippi, and she was beaten and injured severely, just trying to vote. Black churches were burned for hosting voter registration efforts. All in this nation's history, whose founding documents speak eloquently to freedom. Now, why am I telling you that? I'm telling you that because laws are not self-executing. You can have wonderful laws on paper, but if you don't have men and women of goodwill, men and women who are committed to those ideals, then all you have are words on paper. Now, I want to go back and personalize this. I talked about Judge McCree, but I want to go back and talk to you about this in my own lifetime. Now, I don't want you all to do the math again, but I was born the same year that the first of the Brown cases was filed in a district court in the U.S. 3 years later, the Supreme Court issued the Brown case, Brown 1. A year later, in 1955, the court issued the Remedies case, Brown 2. And a couple of years later, I began school. Now, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, has pronounced that separate but equal is inherently unequal. When I began school in a 2-room cinder block school in what is now Olive Branch, Mississippi. Grades 1 and 2 were in room 1. Grade 3 was in room 2. The kids who went to the higher grades went to school at a black church up the hill across the cemetery from our school. Our school had no running water. It had no indoor facilities. It had no cafeteria. It had a gas stove in each of the 2 rooms, and they were fairly capacious rooms, so the heaters did not exactly warm all of the contours of that building. The kids who went to the school up the hill would bring these 10-gallon things of water down to the elementary school so that the young kids down there would have water to drink. Now, within a short distance from us, there was another school that had all of the amenities that represented a humane place for a person to get an education. But that school was off limits to us because of the arbitrary fact of our color. The Supreme Court spoke, but Mississippi did not act. And that's why I say again to you that laws are not self-executing. It was not until 1965 when the federal government said, Mississippi, you will no longer get funds for education if you persist in violating the law of the land and having a segregated school system. And so Mississippi said, okay, we will desegregate, but we can't do it all at once. I mean, after all, you know, if you look at the spectrum of a person's school life, there are differences between the older kids and the young kids. So we will implement a choice plan, and we will allow the young kids to come to the schools first, and then we will allow other kids. Well, so they did. In 1967, I transferred from the safety and comfort of my school, the all-black school, to the school that was formerly all-white. I, along with 3 other African-American women. And it was an interesting environment there. And I tell you this because the lessons of my life inform and shape who I am today. When we went to that school, there was a lot of resistance. And it was very difficult. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. It was very difficult because we were in an environment where we were not welcome. And unfortunately, at that time, the principal forbade the teachers from giving any of the black kids any information about college. I've been an honor student at my school, and I thought when I went to this new school, I should be an honor student. And so I worked hard, and I became an honor student. Well, you had to be there a year before you could be evaluated for Honor Society, and so after a year, I became a member of the Honor Society, and it was an amazing thing. In my environment at Mississippi, there was chaos, and there were fights, and there were all kind of horrible things, and there was actually a lot of exclusion. I became a member of the Honor Society, and the Honor Society decided that it was going to go on a trip to New York. We were going to take the bus. I went home and told my mother, who was a domestic, that the Honor Society was going to go to New York for a trip, and I knew that she could not afford to send me. And I told her, it's okay. I know we can't afford this, so it's okay that I don't go. And she said to me, if they're going, you're going. And I thought, oh God. Because I was actually afraid to be away from the comfort of people who looked like me. And because every day at school, I would go home to the safety of my parents. No matter what had happened at that school, when I went home, I had people who were nurturing and caring and who loved me and who were going to protect me. In New York, I thought not so much. So later on, the school decided New York is pretty far, and so it's going to take too long to go there on a bus, and so they were going to fly. And I went home, I was pretty elated, and told my mother, well, they're going to fly, and so I know we can't afford for me to go, and that's okay. And she said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but if they're going, you're going. And so I resigned myself that I was probably going, and I did. I was the only African-American student on the Honor Society. An amazing thing happened. Because, you know, when we interact with people and we form relationships, we look for commonalities. And whereas there was a horrible environment back in Mississippi with exclusion and fights and all of that, when we went to New York, we all of a sudden focused on what we had in common more so than what divided us. We were in Manhattan, and I'm sure all of you have gone to Manhattan, but we were young kids at that time from Olive Branch. And in Olive Branch, you used to sit on the porch and you'd wave to the cars and speak to everybody. We got to New York, and we're walking down the street as a group. And we're saying to people as we meet them, hello, hello, hello. And they're looking at us as if we're Martians. All of a sudden, race was not a thing that divided us. Being country kids in Manhattan was what we all had in common. And this feeling of feeling like fools is what bound us together. And so that experience taught me that we really have to always look at what we have in common more than what divides us, because at the core, all of us want the same thing: an opportunity to apply our talents. We want equal access, equal dignity. We want an opportunity for safety and provide for our families and do things like that. That's what keeps us held together. So I took that experience with me, and it has informed who I am today. I want to move forward and tell you that when I graduated high school, I didn't know, and I still to this day don't know, how I managed to find my way to college, because no one gave me or the other 3 students any information about college. I learned after I became a judge that I'd earned scholarships to college, but I didn't get those. The counselor told me when I became a general sessions judge, told my husband rather, that I'd earned these scholarships, but that she was not permitted to give those. And so that informed the choice of where I went to school, because I had to find a place that was close enough and one that I could afford to go to, since I had no assistance from anywhere. That tells me that how you respond to a situation is more important than the situation itself. I have drawn lessons from those experiences that have provided me strength and have helped me to build character, and has enabled me to get through a number of things as I've moved along the way. And so when I became a judge in 1982, thinking back on those experiences, I will share with you, I was the first African-American judge in the history of the state of Tennessee, as Judge Hood told you. And I had a clerk of court who really wanted me to be successful. He was not my clerk of court, he was the clerk of court. The clerk of court staffed the court for the judges. And this man, he was a white male, he was a very kind man. And when I opened court, having had my investiture ceremony that morning, when I opened court that afternoon, I opened court to a situation where I was sitting there in my black robe in my elevated position. Right below me, I had 2 clerks, an African-American female and an African-American male. I had an African-American male prosecutor. And I had 4 deputies, each armed with .38 Smith & Wesson specials, stationed around the courtroom, 3 African-American males and 1 African-American female. I only had 4 cases on the docket that day. The first person to come into the courtroom on this traffic charge was a young white male. And he walked into the courtroom and he looked around the room, and his eyes grew increasingly wide as he looked around and saw no one who looked like him. He came to the bench with fear and trepidation and asked for a continuance. And I granted that continuance. And he came back 30 days later with an African-American defense attorney. And I thought to myself, you know, this person, even though he knew nothing about me and I knew nothing about him, he must have felt there is no way that I can get justice in this place where no one looks like me. And so I told the clerk, let's shift out some personnel, because you know what? The perception of justice is just as important as the actuality of justice. If a person comes into a situation and feels that they have been deprived of an opportunity for fairness and impartiality, no matter what happens, they will always doubt and suspect the outcome. And so that perception is important. In becoming a lawyer, going back to lawyers as leaders, all of us in here are stakeholders in and guardians of justice. It is important, no matter what your practice area, that you bear in mind that you have an obligation to lead in your area. And leading doesn't always mean being on the news, being quoted somewhere. It means being a person of integrity, being a person who upholds the ideals of the profession, being one who instills and inspires confidence in the courts, being one who takes pro bono and recognizes that denial of access to the courts for individuals who cannot afford that is a problem. We cannot have justice that is rationed according to socioeconomic conditions and wealth. You, in your profession, are the only ones who can rectify that situation. I know that you're all busy. I know that you all have more than you could possibly do. But you have got to speak up on policy matters where you know that the broad impact of those policies are injurious to the health and safety and the development of our country and our community. You have to do that. You know that the issue of unbridled mass incarceration is one that is unsustainable. You know that a denial of nutrition to children in the early ages is injurious to their growth and development. You know that you cannot raise contributing citizens if you don't take care of early education and health needs in children. You know that. And so you are in the position, you are educated, and you can speak to policy. And why should you speak to policy? Well, I will give you the words of Minister Niemöller, who spoke to this, talking about the cowardice of German intellectuals in the face of the rise of the Nazis and under Hitler's rise. He said, "First they came for the communist, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialist. I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." Even though these situations do not touch you directly, as a leader, all of these things touch you indirectly. Because if we don't have the participation of citizens in the society, then how can we have a proud democracy? Dr. King said that cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? But conscience asks the question, is it right? There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but that person must take that position because it's right. As lawyers, you are the best educated, you are in the best position to speak out, to influence policy, to protect rights, to promote justice, to ensure equal access and equal opportunity. And you have to do that for each and every one, even if it does not affect you directly. Our country is at a critical time. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois said in 1903 that the great problem of the 20th century was the color line. That's still an issue, but there are other problems. But there are no problems that we as lawyers don't have the ability to affect. And you are influencing the course of history even when you don't seek to do so. Growing up, I didn't know any lawyers. I met lawyers probably around 1961 or 62 when 3 young white lawyers came to Mississippi to help in the voter registration and the desegregation of public institutions. They came to our community. And they lived in homes. 3 of them stayed at our home. They were outside agitators. They were not welcome in our community. And so they couldn't stay in the hotels, but they couldn't stay in hotels for 2 reasons. First, they were outside agitators, and secondly, Olive Branch didn't have a hotel, so it was imperative that they stay elsewhere. But I looked at those lawyers and I thought how brave they were. 2 were from New York and 1 was from California. They were young people who traveled far from home at great public risk to help a people that they didn't know. They had no obligation to do that, except they knew that in order to keep a person oppressed, you have to have some measure of staying down with them. And these young people believed in those ideals ensconced in our charters of freedom. I looked at them and thought how wonderful it would be to be a lawyer. But you know, when I did my own inventory, there was nothing in me that suggested that I could do what they did. We were on different sides of a racial divide. And I put that idea out of my head for a long time. But you know, it never ever went away. And so I later on became a lawyer. And I think that we have the best profession. I know that you can't have a world that's just populated by all lawyers because somebody has to take care of plumbing and cooking and all that. But you know, I am proud to be a lawyer. And I hope that you are as proud of your profession today as you were the day you took that oath. You do so much, and there is so much to be done that only you can do. Never shirk away from the opportunity to be proud in your profession and to do all of the things that you know only lawyers can do. You are leaders. Be proud leaders. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And I am so grateful to be a part of this wonderful profession. Thank you for all that you do.
The Honorable Bernice Donald, ladies and gentlemen. Just as a housekeeping measure, I've been given 2 directives. One is return the name tags or there'll be violence. And the second is our next and last quarterly luncheon will be April 29, 2014, the Gilman Lunch, and the speaker then will be Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Bridget McCormick. Thank you for coming.